As I said, good afternoon. Welcome to Money and Politics and Elections Outlook for the 2024 legislative session. I'm pleased today to be joined by Cindy Black, League member and Executive Director of Fixed Democracy First. Many of you know Cindy from the Wednesday Democracy Happy Hour, and she is our partner in the annual Lobby Week. Also on our team as democracy advocates are Marilyn Byfield, Wendy Pierce, and Carol Sullivan. During the next little over an hour, we will share a brief outlook of the legislation as we foresee it as of today for 2004 and opportunities for you to become involved. This is a high-level, fast-paced introduction. Please use chat for questions or raise your virtual hand during Q&A at the end of each section. We have invited guest speakers to join us to provide detail on a couple of our priority bills, and our team will be covering others. Guests for this session are Nilu Jenks and Lisa Aero, who will discuss how the Washington Voices Act will work, and John Bonifax, who will discuss ending foreign influence corporate money in our elections. And now over to Carol Sullivan to introduce our first guest. Carol, you're on mute.
I had it off my screen. I apologize. My apologies. Okay, so first up, we're going to learn about Washington voting options, implementation, compliance, education, and Standards Act. It's an update of our familiar local options bill, but we're going to know it as the Washington Voices Act. Lisa Aero is director of Fairport, Washington, and she learned the value of ranked choice voting from a lesson designed for her middle school math students. She's a Stanford University grad who, with her husband, spent 2 years in the Peace Corps living in Niger, Africa, under a military dictatorship. And that experience taught Lisa that our democracy is important and we need to be taking care of it. Lisa believes that ranked choice voting gives voters a more powerful voice in elections. And Nilu Jenks is Fairport, Washington's political director. She believes ranked choice voting will help reduce harmful rhetoric in elections and help voters feel that their votes matter. Nilu's been advocating for climate change actions, and as a graduate of Wellesley College, she wants to see greater women's representation in government. She is a recent City of Seattle Council candidate, a mother of 2, and an avid reader. She and Lisa are going to explain to us what the Washington, Voices Act can do for Washington voters. We welcome you both. So let's learn about Washington Voices.
Carol, thank you for that nice introduction. I'm going to jump in first and then Nilu will wrap it up. We'll try to keep it pretty crisp and I'll look forward to your questions at the end. The Washington Voices Act, as Carol has said, is a new name, a refreshed version of a bill that some of you may already be quite familiar with, local options for ranked choice voting. It still contains all the essential policy of that bill with some additional updates for the current context. I want to start with, Cindy, if you could move over to the next slide, a court case this last June in Washington State Supreme Court issued a ruling in a case that was not directly centered on ranked choice voting, but had some important implications for how we are bringing the message to the legislature this year. Let me just back up for just a moment to acknowledge, speaking with League members, you all, I know, all of us, I'm a League member as well, were instrumental in getting this Washington Voting Rights Act passed. In 2018, Washington was one of the early states to pass statewide Voting Rights Act protections, which, as we've seen in the time since then, are increasingly important as the protections under the federal Voting Rights Act are being chipped away, let's just say, we're seeing some erosion of those rights. So Washington State has this Voting Rights Act, which in some ways, in several ways, extends beyond what's available under the federal Voting Rights Act. This June 2023 ruling was only the second ruling on this under this act, this Washington VRA, and in it, even though the case itself was not centered on ranked choice voting, the justices went out of their way to clarify and confirm that jurisdictions in Washington State do have the authority to adopt ranked choice voting if they are at all concerned that they might even someday be out of compliance with the WVRA, which, as you all know, guarantees that voters in protected classes, which includes ethnic minorities, racial minorities, and language minorities, that those voters have the ability to elect a candidate of their choice. So, given this ruling this last June, the justices of the Supreme Court have effectively widened the door. They've opened the door wider than ever for local jurisdictions to simply proceed on their own authority to adopt ranked choice voting without waiting for the legislature to act. And we have seen 4 jurisdictions in the last few years decide not to wait for a local options bill. We saw Seattle go ahead this last year in late 2022, has adopted ranked choice voting. They had a special authority as a charter city to do that. We also saw San Juan County and Clark County attempting to use their authority as nonpartisan charter counties to pass ranked choice voting for county races. Those did not pass, but each of those measures would have brought its own set of policy for implementing ranked choice voting in those jurisdictions. And previously in 2020, we saw Yakima County plaintiffs in a Voting Rights Act case there endeavoring to adopt ranked choice voting. Again, that did not end up being the outcome, but that again would have been its own unique set of rules for implementing ranked choice voting. So Cindy, if you could go to the next slide. Here's the thing. This is the message to legislators. Without legislative guidance, without passing a bill like the Washington Voices Act, we're going to see increasingly local governments and courts that are considering ranked choice voting are each going to be independently developing their own unique methodology for implementation. And that is not a good landscape to look ahead to. Well, election administrators don't want to see that. We don't want to see that for voters in Washington. We could have, 39 counties with 39 different ways of implementing ranked choice voting. Cindy, next slide. So this is what the Washington Voices Act will do. Ensure that Washington Administrative Code will provide consistent rules for the use of ranked choice voting in Washington State. Next slide. The intention here is to provide baseline definitions so that, again, we have consistent standards, not only for implementation of the elections, but also for what's required for voter education, where ranked choice voting is used. Next slide. And the bill directs the Secretary of State to establish 2 work groups, which will in turn recommend rules for implementation, as well as standards for voter education. And next slide. Okay, I'm going to let Nilu pick up from here, but I want to add one more thing that I failed to mention. This bill is starting. Representative Mia Gregerson will be. We expect her to be pre-filing next week. We should have a bill number shortly after that, and we do anticipate there will be a companion bill in the Senate, and we're not quite ready to announce the prime sponsor there. Nilu, why might jurisdictions want to be adopting ranked choice voting?
Thanks, Lisa. I'll just take a minute to say thank you to everyone. I'm grateful to be here. Again, I'm Nilu Jenks, Political Director with Fair Vote Washington. I want to give a quick shout out to Carol Sullivan for that beautiful reveal of the acronym of the Voices Act and what it stands for. And I want to thank all of you. I know you all do a lot of work and your time is precious, so thank you for being here. So what is ranked choice voting? It is basically just the standard, like always, vote for your favorite, your first option. But if you want, you can actually rank backup options. And second, third, fourth, whatever is here, you can see hemlock is the first choice, and then cedar is second, and pine is third. Cindy, do you mind? Why ranked choice voting? It's actually the fastest growing nonpartisan voting reform in the country. Alaska and Maine have recently really been in the news for that reason. And there are a lot of other, Minnesota, we've seen a lot there, and I'm excited to see it in Seattle. It tamps down on negative campaigning and actually encourages coalition building and reaching out to a broader group of voters, because you want people to vote you second or third, and not just put a first person potentially even. Like, you want them to really engage in this process. It improves representation. We've seen great in Alaska just got its first Indigenous Representatives Congress, and New York City just had a massive increase in how many women they have in their council. It empowers voters by giving them more choices, as I explained, and voters who have tried ranked choice voting overwhelmingly like it. I'll add that Australia, I just spoke to an Australian yesterday, have been using it for over 100 years. So it's a well-used and tested program in many countries. So Cindy, do you mind? We're gonna do a quick little video to show you a little bit about it, just in case anybody didn't know what it was. Can you press play, Cindy? I don't see the triangle.
Hold on a second. I have to switch screens. I wasn't aware that we were doing a video. Hold on one second.
Sorry.
And while Cindy's doing that, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. In just a couple minutes, we'll have about 5 minutes for Q&A on this. So we're happy to hear your questions.
Politics is tearing us apart. And it's because elections aren't working for most of us. Here's why. In the US, each of us can vote for the candidate we like the most. But whenever more than 2 candidates are running to win 1 seat, it's possible for most voters to hate whoever wins.
Cindy, we're not seeing the video.
Because of the split vote, politicians can ignore.
So it sounds like
We're hearing the sound, but we're not seeing
Politics is tearing us.
1 second.
No
Sorry,
worries.
I didn't know we had a video. I would have already,
I should have alerted you to that, Cindy.
sorry, I didn't know. I thought it was just a graphic. Just give me a second. 1 second,
Yeah.
please.
You're doing great. I would still vote for you to be our assistant.
Yes, it's unflappable.
Okay, seeing it now?
Yep.
Let's start it over.
Politics is tearing us apart. And it's because elections aren't working for most of us. Here's why. In the US, each of us can vote for the candidate we like the most. But whenever more than 2 candidates are running to win 1 seat, it's possible for most voters to hate whoever wins. Because of the split vote, politicians can ignore the will of most voters and still win. Ranked choice voting gives you the freedom to select a backup choice to prevent that from happening. Let's say a group uses ranked choice voting to decide what to eat for dinner tonight. Each voter selects their favorite dish, but also has the option to choose backup dishes. If one food receives more than half the votes, it wins, just like in any other election. But let's get to dessert, where the competition is more fierce. What if no ice cream flavor has more than 50% of the vote? Under a normal race, vanilla would win, even though a majority of voters didn't pick it. With ranked choice voting, the flavor with the fewest votes is eliminated, and voters who chose that flavor as number 1 will have their votes count for their next choice. Everyone gets a say, no one wastes their vote, and the winner is the flavor that the largest number of people agreed upon. That's ranked choice voting. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. You get more voice and more choice, and that makes elections better for all of us.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have 3 minutes for questions, and I see a couple in the chat already. The first one is, what do we know about voter participation with ranked choice voting? Have we any studies that indicate whether participation increases or decreases?
Thanks for that great question, Carol. And we were just addressing that on the meeting earlier today. At this point, the data are not there to connect a causation between ranked choice voting and voter turnout increasing, but the observation, the correlation is strongly there. We're seeing about an increase of about 10% on average in turnout in places that are using ranked choice voting. And we see anecdotally lots of evidence of increased voter engagement. Voters get that their voice matters more, that they have more choices. They're seeing more candidates who appeal to them, and they have more say in those elections. But the studies are not yet there to confirm, to connect that, to say ranked choice voting is causing this increase in voter participation. I'm hopeful we're going to have that information soon. We'll certainly let you know, but at this point, we do not make a claim that ranked choice voting increases voter turnout.
Great, thank you. So what are the arguments against this mode? How does it affect the role of parties, particularly when looking at statewide elections? Consider the positives and the negatives.
And I get about a minute and a half for all of that. So what we're seeing is increasingly, the more people know about ranked choice voting, the more the reasons to oppose it drop away. Most of the opposing arguments are based on lack of information or misinformation. For example, we'll hear people say, oh, I believe in one person, one vote. Therefore, I am opposed to ranked choice voting. Well, that's just a misunderstanding of ranked choice voting. It has been upheld in numerous court cases to be, in fact, exactly consistent with one person with one vote and so on. We do hear whichever party happens to be in control in a certain area will be opposed to changes in that system. But across the country, you see some places that where Republicans are in favor of ranked choice voting, most notably Virginia and Utah, but other places as well, other places where Democrats take the lead. So what we do know is this is a reform that works for voters. It empowers voters, and voters love it. I think I'll stop there.
All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for the information that you put in the chat. We are recording this so that links will be available for later use. And there's really a great amount of information at the Fair Vote Washington website. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Cindy Black, who will lead us through this next session. Thank you so much, Lisa and Nilu.
Hi, everyone. As Cindy mentioned, I'm Cindy Black. I'm the Executive Director of Fixed Democracy First and also a long-term member of the League of Women Voters. Currently, I'm with the Snohomish League. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of bills, and then we're going to bring up our guest speaker to talk about the second one. But the first one I want to talk about is statewide public funding of elections using a democracy voucher program. This effort is being spurred on by the People Powered Elections Washington Coalition that works on campaign finance reform, the League of Women Voters, Fixed Democracy First, the Washington Bus, and several other organizations are part of that coalition, looking to try to get a statewide democracy voucher program. This is very similar to the program that has been in Seattle since 2015. It was voted on. 2017 was the first election cycle it's been used. This gives 4 $25 vouchers to residents of Seattle to give to participating candidates of their choice. We would like to expand that statewide to legislative races. We did have a bill introduced this last session. This is House Bill 1755. Unfortunately, we did not get a hearing. We did get a work session on democracy vouchers just about a month ago, and that was very positive. We had Erin McKean from Campaign Legal Center, as well as Wayne Barnett and Renee LeBeau from Seattle Ethics and Elections Commission speak about that, and was a very positive session to talk about voucher program. So we are updating the language. There's a few updates we needed to add to the existing bill, including one thing that we didn't realize is that current law only allows local jurisdictions to adopt public funding of elections, and we need to expand that to state elections. So we're adding that component to the bill, as well as a few other kind of updates with the help of Campaign Legal Center. And as I mentioned, this would cover legislative district races, so representatives and senators in each LD. This would be overseen by the Public Disclosure Commission. We've also been meeting with them and discussing ways to support them in this effort. And the current big question is, how are we going to pay for this program? And we're looking at a variety of ways to do that. One of the ways that seem the most popular is possible lobbying fees and fines. So if there's existing fines, and if the PDC has excess fines, that could be used for the program, and also maybe instituting some lobbying fees, in particular around large business groups and corporations that are spending a lot of money in lobbying, maybe have some type of a fee attached to that. We're still exploring those options. Our sponsor is Rep. Daria Farvar in the House. We have not had a Senate sponsor yet, but we're working on that right now. So we're very excited about expanding the Democracy Voucher Program. And then I will also mention that those that live in Seattle, we are also looking at the Seattle levy renewal. The Seattle program is paid for by a property tax, but it has to be renewed every 10 years. So that will be most likely on the ballot in Seattle in 2025 to renew that levy to continue the program there. So our coalition is working on that, but statewide, we're working on the voucher program. So now I want to bring up our next guest that's going to be talking about ending foreign money in our elections. John Bonifaz is a constitutional attorney and co-founder and president of Free Speech for People. John previously served as the executive director and general counsel of the National Voting Rights Institute, an organization he founded in 1994, and as the legal director of Voter Action, a national election integrity organization. He has been at the forefront of key voting rights and democracy campaigns in the United States for more than 3 decades. Thank you so much, John, for being here to talk about this important piece of legislation.
Thank you, Cindy. Thanks so much to you and Fixed Democracy First and the Legal Women Voters of Washington State for partnering with us on this important legislation. This is model legislation to end foreign influence corporate spending in Washington elections. It has already passed in the state of Minnesota. The state of Minnesota became the first state in the country in May of this year to enact it, and it has already been law since January 2020 in Seattle. And I'll just share some brief context for this before getting into the details of this law, which is, you may remember right after the Citizens United ruling in January of 2010, then President Obama, in his State of the Union address, criticized the ruling with the justices seated before him and said that it would lead to foreign influence in our elections. And Justice Alito famously broke decorum, shook his head, and mouthed the words, "not true." But we now know, unfortunately, that President Obama's prediction was true, not just with the way in which foreign interference occurred in our elections in 2016 from the Russian government, but the way in which foreign investors can now subvert existing federal law, which bans foreign nationals from spending money directly or indirectly in our elections, and can do so through the corporate form. And this bill is designed to close that loophole. It defines foreign influence corporations as corporations having either 1% single stock ownership from foreign investor or 5% in the aggregate from foreign investors. Those thresholds may sound low, but in fact, a 1% single stock owner of a Fortune 500 company owns millions of dollars of shares of that company, can get the CEO on the phone, can introduce under the regulations a shareholder resolution, and has significant influence over the corporate decision-making. John Coates, who's a corporate law expert from Harvard Law School, who has testified in support of this bill in a variety of jurisdictions, including in Seattle, has demonstrated in his testimony how that 1% and 5% set of thresholds works in the real world in terms of influencing corporate decision-making. The other point to highlight is that in 2012, 2 years after Citizens United, the Supreme Court, in a case known as Blumen v. FEC, upheld the federal law that has existed for decades, barring foreign nationals from spending money directly or indirectly in our elections. And Blumen was a Canadian citizen who sought to challenge the law after Citizens United, and he wanted to spend approximately $500 in support of the Obama campaign. So his $500 expenditure was deemed to be unlawful under the law. And then Judge Kavanaugh for the DC Circuit Court of Appeals wrote the opinion that was upheld by the Supreme Court on the basis that the law protects American self-government. And that's what this bill does as well. It protects American self-government and ensures that foreign investors are not able to influence the political decisions and political elections in the United States. It would affect 98% of the S&P 500, all of which have this significant level of foreign investment. And in the last session, led with State Senators Billig and Wynn, it passed the state Senate with strong support via a bill that was through the Public Disclosure Commission being advanced. This time it's going to be advanced as a standalone bill with Senator Wynn as championing it in the Senate and Representative Mena championing it in the House. This bill is also pending in a number of other states where it is gaining momentum as well. In New York State, it's passed in New York State Senate with bipartisan support 3 times, and we're hoping it's going to get through the Assembly in the next session. In California, it may go to a full Assembly vote in January. In Massachusetts, it's been pending for a while, and in Hawaii, it's passed the state Senate. It's also pending in Congress. Congressman Jamie Raskin is championing it in the House, and Senator Elizabeth Warren has been championing it in the Senate as part of a broad anti-corruption package. What's at stake here really is protecting American self-government, and Washington State can help lead the way in enacting this kind of model legislation for the nation. Cindy, I was inspired by the video on ranked choice voting, and I shared in the chat with you a very short video on this bill if you're able to play. It's from the New York bill, but it applies here.
Everyone seeing that okay?
Nearly half of Americans believe our democracy is broken. It's hard to blame them. In 2010, the U.S. Supreme Court's Citizens United decision gave corporations the green light to spend unlimited money to influence federal, state, and even local elections. And that's what giant corporations have done, drowning out the voices of ordinary citizens. Whose money are these corporations spending? And whose interests are the executives looking out for? Many are substantially owned or influenced by foreign investors. The Saudi government can't spend money in U.S. elections. That's illegal. But it can leverage its stake in American companies so that they do exactly that by proxy. In fact, 40% of corporate stock is owned by foreign investors. Whether those investors are Russian oligarchs, Canadian energy conglomerates, or European financiers, corporate decisions are increasingly influenced by these foreign concerns. And they are shaping the laws that we live by. That's a direct threat to our democratic self-government. But we can fix it. All across the country, the American people are fighting back. 73% of Americans, including majorities of both Democrats and Republicans, support limiting political spending by companies with any foreign ownership. 7 states are currently considering a ban on foreign-influenced corporate political spending, including New York. New York's Democracy Preservation Act would prevent some of the biggest multinational corporate political spenders from pouring money into New York State and municipal elections. By passing the Democracy Preservation Act, New York has the chance to rebuild trust in democracy. Learn more about these critical nationwide efforts to ban foreign-influenced corporate political spending at freespeechforpeople.org.
Thank you, Cindy, and thanks again for your partnership.
And I think we have time for just a couple of questions. If anybody would like to ask a question, please put it in the chat. Here is one from Patrice. What info is available about recent campaign contributions from foreign ownership? I am more concerned that foreign corporate owners would be able to spend in independent committees or PACs.
Well, so I think it varies state by state in terms of the kind of spending that's happening. But we know that Amazon, for example, spent $1.5 million to try to influence the city council races in November 2019 in Seattle, which led to the Seattle City Council unanimously passing this law. And Amazon, as a result, has been barred from making expenditures since then. So it depends jurisdiction by jurisdiction which companies are showing up. But I think what's important here is that multinational corporations, by definition, are going to have significant foreign ownership. So this bill effectively ends multinational corporate spending in elections.
Great. Any other final questions before we move on to our next segment? And thank you so much, John, for all your leadership. And John has just been instrumental in helping jurisdictions around the country with their legal team to make sure that we get this bill introduced, help with the bill language, and get expert testimony. So thank you so much, John, for all your support.
Thank you. We're proud to be working with you.
It definitely takes a team, and this is one of the league's priority issues is money in politics. So I'm really grateful for this national support. Cindy, before we go.
Yeah, we had one final question from Noel. What are the arguments against this legislation? I think that's a good question that we should cover before we.
Yes, I mean, this legislation faced opposition in the last session from corporate actors who argued that this is going to chill their speech, their corporate speech, by effectively barring them from being able to spend money in elections. Now, of course, we know prior to Citizens United, there was no such thing at the federal level of them even having speech rights as people. But the more important point here is that foreign investors do not have any First Amendment rights in the United States. There is no such thing as the right for foreign nationals to speak in U.S. elections. And that's been established, again, by the Blumen v. FEC ruling of 2012 of the Supreme Court. So the real question here is, does this bill rightly close that loophole and bar foreign investors from influencing our elections? Corporations that have foreign investments of these levels will not be able to spend money in elections. If they want to engage in making these kinds of expenditures, they can forego that foreign investment, or they can decide, to set up a corporate PAC that will have individuals contribute to the PAC, but will not involve their general treasury funds. I will say the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, not surprisingly, has challenged the Minnesota law in federal court on these corporate speech grounds. And we are helping the Minnesota Attorney General's office to vigorously defend the law. But as I know from our conversations with legislators in Washington State, they want to see this move forward, even irrespective of what goes on in Minnesota, because it's important for Washington State to take a stand as well and have some leadership on this.
And John, you mentioned who our sponsors are in both the House and the Senate. And last year, this particular piece was introduced around banning foreign influence corporations. It was added to a PDC bill. It did pass the Senate. Unfortunately, it wasn't bipartisan. It was just Democrats who voted on it, but it did not get out of the House. After much discussion with legislators and others, including the PDC, that's why it's becoming a standalone bill, and it will have a brand new bill number. And it's going to be pushed first through the House with Representative Charlotte Mena. And also Chair Ramos, who leads the State Government Committee, has already said that we will be getting a hearing on this bill, and he is going to do his best to move it out of the committee forward. So we're feeling very optimistic about this bill as it goes forward. And Cindy Madigan and I have been working on, well, what are some of these corporations that donate to Washington elections? Who are these companies? Cindy, did you want to mention a couple of those?
Well, I was really surprised when I realized Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad is a subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway, which is a London company. Um, and oh, I'm drawing blank, Cindy. You helped me on that too. I can't think right now.
The Hathaway you're talking about?
Yeah, no, another example of another corporation.
Oh, well, we know Amazon for sure, Uber,
Uh-huh.
Bank of America, Starbucks, Boeing. All of these are large companies that have significant foreign ownership that are at least minimum those thresholds we mentioned or beyond that. And we're working on getting a more complete list as well.
Right. I just remembered the other one, Cal Portland. I thought, well, what's that? It's a cement manufacturer out of Portland, but they are a subsidiary of a Japanese company. So there's a lot of influence in these multinational corporations. And then we have just a couple more minutes, but Cindy, Deanne asked a question about the participation for democracy vouchers in Seattle. And I know that the Seattle Ethics and Election Commission has done really a lot of good research on that. I don't have the link handy right here, but they've done some good work on identifying participation. And there's also been third-party groups that have done some research on the effect of democracy vouchers, and that's on their website.
Yeah, the Seattle Ethics and Elections website has a list of all the different studies that have been done internally as well as externally. Also, the Win-Win Network also did a good study to show that people that, especially around low propensity and first-time voters, were more likely to vote in an election if they used their vouchers. And we've seen really uptick in turnout with people that had normally never donated to election before, especially lower income, communities of color, younger people, and so forth. We've seen a huge uptick in participation in elections by being able to use the voucher program. There was also a recent polling that we just did, and of people in Seattle, and over 73% are really either very satisfied or satisfied with the program and would like it to continue. So there's a lot more studies out. Unfortunately, we don't have time to dig into all of them. I am going to put a link in the chat for if anybody wants to check out the work session from the House State Government and Tribal Relations Committee on October 27th. You can check that out. It also talked about ranked choice voting. So 2 of the subjects we talked about, as well as a couple other subjects. So you can check that out. I believe the voucher program's about when they talk about an hour in or so. Yeah. And any last John, final comments before we move on to our next topic?
No, I don't have any. Thanks so much again.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes, yes. And so now our next topic, we're going to switch over to elections, and Marilyn Byfield is going to take over for this slide.
Okay. Harassment of, did I unmute?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Harassment of election workers has become a major problem over the last few years. Election workers have had their families threatened and have been forced to move from their homes for doing their job. Legislation was passed in a 2022 cybersecurity bill that made.
Oh, you muted yourself, Marilyn.
Harassing election officials, elect person, or in a written letter is still a misdemeanor. Election workers are entrusted by the public to carry out elections fairly and with integrity. When they are threatened for doing their jobs, it impacts retention. HB 1241 was introduced last session to make the punishment the same regardless of how the threat is delivered, and the League will continue to support its passage in 2024. This bill allows for those election workers who are harassed to apply to the Address Confidentiality Program to protect their home addresses.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marilyn. This is another bill the League has been supporting and will continue to support. And now we have more time for Q&A. We are nicely ahead of schedule. We have another 5 minutes or so. If there's any questions, I see Lisa and Nilu are still on. So even if you have questions about ranked choice voting, about anything that we talked about earlier, we have until 1:05 for more questions. Wow. Everyone did such a good job on their presentation. It's good. Seems all clear. Okay.
There's a couple questions just popped up in the chat. One is about, what do you hear from Hobbs, which is the Secretary of State on ranked choice voting? Does Lisa or Nilu like to cover that one?
There's Lisa.
I'm happy to address that. Secretary Hobbs is not a fan of ranked choice voting. We're hoping that that will continue to shift. He, I think, is open to hearing from folks who want to make sure that you know, he has the full benefit of the facts. His concerns are that ranked choice voting will be too confusing for voters, and particularly voters who may not have English as their first language, or voters who have any intellectual disabilities. What the facts show is that voters do just fine with ranked ballots. Again, remember that nobody ever has to rank. You can still vote just the way you always have and just pick one and submit your ballot, and you are in no, you're at no disadvantage compared to where you are now. So again, anybody who's able to vote now is able to vote in a ranked choice election, and all of the facts indicate that voters do in fact understand, and we don't see any increased data. All the data are very clear that there are no more errors. Voters make no more errors in ranked elections than they do in normal elections. So in fact, some of the data that we have show that there's a lower error rate of mismarked ballots in ranked choice elections compared to normal elections. So Secretary Hobbs, we've been trying to make sure that he has that information and to push back on his opposition, but he is at this point opposed.
And Kit has asked, when will the Washington Voices Act be introduced?
We're anticipating pre-filing next week, right after committee days winds up on December 4th and 5th. Representative Gregerson will be circulating the sheet to her colleagues to get them to sign on as co-sponsors. And then we're anticipating also a Senate companion bill in the next couple of weeks. Before session starts, we hope to pre-file both bills, and we will let you all know.
And that's true of any new bill. They can start pre-filing bills as early as next week. So we anticipate the Foreign Influence Corporation bill is going to also be pre-filed before the session starts as well. So we'll have a bill number soon on that.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you for sticking around. Good. Well, let's move on to Wendy Pierce. She is another one of our advocates from the democracy team. She is going to talk a little bit more about Act via Zoom that Cynthia had mentioned at the introduction.
Thanks, Cindy. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Wendy Pierce from the democracy team, and we want to make sure that everyone is aware of the upcoming Act via Zoom information sessions. We all know that a strong democracy requires informed citizen participation, and these weekly sessions invite you to learn more about the topics that we are called to take action on in our legislative action letters. You'll be informed of the basics during the sessions, and then you can use the legislative action letter to let your legislators hear your voice. I'm going to be hosting these weekly Act via Zoom sessions, and they will include the opportunity for question and answer. They will take place on Mondays, 10 to 11 a.m., starting January 8th and going through March 11th. They're open to league members and guests. We have league, state, and community presenters with background on legislative topics scheduled to speak. It's really easy to register for the sessions. Just go out to the league website, LWVWA.org, click on events, and then go to the January 2024 calendar page. Once you have hopefully registered, you'll get a reminder each week about an hour before the session starts. If you happen to miss a session that you were particularly interested in, no worries. Every session is recorded and you can go out to the League's YouTube channel and watch at your convenience. And just lastly, to give you just a small idea of the topics that'll be presented, on January 8th, the issue chairs are going to give updates on priority bills. Some of the other topics will be the Washington Voices Act, even year elections, consumer environmental issues, learning how a bill becomes law, and much more. We're going to be packing a lot of information into these 1-hour sessions, and we really hope you'll sign up. Thank you. Questions?
I saw that Carolyn had put a question in about even year elections, and I wanted to say that, you know, the League every year we establish our priority legislation, and the combination of that and not having a League position specific to even year, I don't think we're going to be endorsing it this year, but because people are going to be interested in, we will have a probably a program on it, because what we want to do in ACT is really help everyone be able to take a deeper dive and really understand the issues going on, and so that you can make up your own mind if you want to advocate. So as you all know, no one speaks for the League except the issue chairs, but you're all welcome to speak on your own behalf individually. And one of the things too with the ACT via Zoom I want to mention is they are recorded. And so you can watch them later when you have time, because I know everybody is busy. And I just saw a note from Mary that Mondays is a very busy time. But we wanted to have it early enough in the week, because a lot of times, our legislative newsletter comes out on Sunday, and there's committee hearings that happen right away. So we wanted to have it early enough in the morning. So if there was any questions, or we always leave it open for a League issue chair to come in early and talk about something that's a super high priority that needs immediate action. So that's why we wanted to make it for Monday morning. Yeah. And so I think, Carol has her hand up.
I just wanted to say, if you have suggestions for a topic you might be interested in that you feel other people would like to learn about that has relation to the legislative session, however kind of tenuous it is, because we're putting the schedule together now, and we want to be sure that we come up with the ideas that you're most interested in. I think we're going to have a great short session, and I'm going to be wishing there were more Mondays to use, because we've got a lot of information that we want to share with you. So please be sure to join us. Wendy, Marilyn, Cindy, and I are all part of the team, and we will all be happy to see you. Thank you.
Okay, so Cindy, you want to go to the next slide? As Cynthia mentioned, we're all volunteers here, and we really encourage anyone who has even a little bit of time to get involved. As you can see, our democracy team works together with state and national partners to understand the complexity of proposed legislation. Many good ideas take a long time to become law, and your help is needed. We were pleased last year to introduce 2 new advocates, Marilyn and Wendy, and I'm really grateful that they, along with Carol, are returning again this year. So we try to make it fun and enjoyable and give people, enough work to be challenging, but not too much to be overwhelming. So we really encourage your participation. We can do a lot of work individually. And we have meetings, we have a lot of fun. And I really encourage you to get involved if you have even a little bit of time. So I think this is all we have. We have a few more minutes for questions, and then it looks like we'll probably be ending this session a little earlier, give you a little break before the next one. But
I do have some announcements for some events coming up. I'd like to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And Cindy, you want to mention your email address?
oh yes, I'll put that in the chat. It's cmadigan@lwvwa.org.
And I have some events I'm going to share in the chat I'd like to mention. The first one is that Yakima is the Washington for Equitable Representation, which the League and Fixed Democracy First, Fair Vote, and other groups are all members of, is hosting a special event in Yakima. So if you or someone you know lives in Yakima wants to learn more about proportional representation, multi-member districts, ranked choice voting, this is a great event to attend. It's a week from today, December 9th at 1 to 3 in Yakima. The registration link is there that has the address and all the other details. It's a free event. They'll be serving lunch, so free food, another motivation to go. So check that out. We are trying to encourage folks from the league to attend that. There are some local league members that are planning to do that as well. And then two other events that Cynthia had mentioned earlier, but are very much democracy related that we wanted to talk about, is the League is hosting the Speak Up School on January 6th. That's in the morning. I believe it's 9 to 12:30. I didn't put the time there, but you can see the link now and go to that page. You can register to attend that as well. Those of you that attended the Speak Up Schools during the redistricting efforts, this is a repeat of that, but it's really good because this will teach you how to talk to your legislators, how to testify before committees, things like that, how to advocate for the bills and the legislation that you support. So definitely recommend you check that event out and sign up if you can. And then of course, our big Democracy Lobby Week is coming up again. The League and Fixed Democracy First are co-sponsors for the event. We've done this event together. This will be the 7th year we've done it. The first 3 years, we actually did it in person in Olympia, and then we moved to virtual with the pandemic, but we decided to keep it virtual because we're able to reach a larger group across the state and to participate in a much bigger way. And doing it over a week rather than one day gives us more opportunity to visit with legislators as well as cover a whole lot more topics. So the registration link I see is up now. So please go ahead and register for Democracy Lobby Week so we know who's coming and who we need to schedule appointments for. So please check out all of those events. And I see Lisa has her hand up.
Shout out to the Lobby Week organizers. That's such a terrific event, and we got inspired by the in-person events as well that you all used to host in Olympia, and we are inspired enough that we're organizing an in-person ranked choice voting focused lobby day that'll be focused on the Washington Voices Act bill. I'd love to have some more signups out of this group. Love to see more of you there. Going to be a fun all day with all the things that you expect from a lobby day. There'll be a rally, great food, a chance to get together with other people in your legislative district, a chance to then meet with your representatives. So would love to see some of you there. Please let us know how we can help you get there. Glad to help. We've got already at this point people signed up from most of the legislative districts all over the state. We're pretty thrilled about that. So people are going to be coming from far and wide. Join us.
Any other questions, comments? We still have a little time. We padded a little time, but just we didn't know how much time we were going to have. So we have extra time for questions, discussion, comments, whatever you'd like to share.
Do you have a list of bills that we might be talking to our legislators about Do you have them prepared, and how can we get that list?
We're working on that. We're going to
Okay.
have that available. It probably won't be available though until January 15th. That's our deadline. We're trying to get it done earlier because the session doesn't start until
The 8th.
the 8th, right. And so we're still waiting on some bill numbers, but we're going to be updating it as we go along because our idea is to try to get out as soon as possible. So as you meet with your legislative district members, you can start talking about who wants to talk about what bill. We pretty much know what we have for democracy already. And we're going to be, like I said, working on that and get that out. One thing we're doing this year too for Speak Up School is we're also going to talk about some of these priority bills in the practice sessions. So you'll get an idea then too on some of these bills and some of the talking points. That was one of the ideas, to use Speak Up School to superpower the advocacy work.
And then to add to that, the hard part with the legislative session is sometimes we don't know about a bill until it's introduced. And then we go, oh, I didn't even know that was happening. And so we do our best to be on top of this bills, but especially being a short session, it's really fast and furious. And so we're always, I'm checking bills on a regular basis. And though we know some bills will carry over, there are some new bills. So, and with the Democracy Lobby Week, we don't cover just democracy related bills. We also cover things around climate and social justice and health and a few other areas. So each issue chair has to come up with their own list of bills, but we are going to try to get that out to registrants to the lobby week, hopefully a week before, at least. But we're going to get them out to you as soon as we humanly possibly can.
Yeah, and I have to send a lot of kudos. I'll get to you, Carol, in just a minute. I send a lot of kudos and appreciation to Cindy Black because she is a technical whiz. So she keeps these talking points updated to the minute. And so we're using a Google Drive so we can keep them updated. So we'll make sure that you get the most recent version possible. And another thing to do, on the League of Women Voters Washington website under advocacy, the issue papers are up for the various issues. So you can get an idea from those issue papers what some of the priority legislation will be for the upcoming session. That's another good resource that you can look at ahead of time.
Can I break in here for a second?
Carol.
Yes, the first Act via Zoom on January 8th is going to be a legislative update, because what we're talking about today, no matter what breakout room you're in, some of it's just, we're just not finalized and we don't have bill numbers, but we'll have all of that ready to go. And it'll be kind of like speed dating with the issue chairs. We'll learn a little bit from here and there and there. We'll go from issue to issue and get updated.
And Carolyn's question about Ms. Love, last year, she spoke about the legislative process, and you're bringing her back again. I believe she's going to be on the first day of lobby week on the 22nd. Is that correct?
It's Laura Love can't be there, but she's sending one of her one of her team. And I know they're going to be just great because they know everything, there is to know. They've created the website. They know where all the nooks and crannies are and what we can get out of it.
And I believe you're going to extend that to an 1.5-hour session that day because we ran out of time last year with questions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Anything else? Looks like we got Cindy Madigan. Oh, well. Go ahead, Amy.
Can I clarify one thing? Ranked choice voting lobby day, Wednesday, January 19th. Is that in person only?
Yes, sorry to be slow on muting there. That is an in-person lobby day, although we have a special request from a wonderful volunteer in Bellingham who isn't going to be able to come in person, and we're going to figure out a way to at least have some live stream portions of it, but it is an in-person day, January 17th for ranked choice voting lobby day. Yes.